Hello and welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast dedicated to igniting your entrepreneurial spirit and empowering you to conquer new horizons. In this podcast, we chat with inspiring entrepreneurs on their journey to success through some amazingly insightful and expansive conversations. These episodes thrive on thought-provoking chats where our guests fearlessly explore their path to success, sharing their experiences, failures, and triumphs. No topic is off limits as we deep dive into the talked about and not so talked about pieces it takes to build a business, overcome limiting beliefs, deal with personal struggles, and everything in between that shapes our lives and our businesses. I'm your host, Kat Polsonelli, creator and founder at The Lotus Effect, where we believe that success is not just about strategies and tactics, it's about cultivating a powerful mindset and creating customized business operations that align with you and your true purpose. Whether it's mastering time management, improving productivity, enhancing leadership skills, or simply fostering a growth-oriented mindset, we'll provide you with the tools and strategies to flourish in both your business and personal life. I'm so excited to have you join us today in this episode, so get ready to feel empowered and inspired as we learn together and from one another on how to rise above challenges, break through limitations, and unlock our full potential. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I'm so super excited to have you guys all with me and my fantastic guest, Miss Kristen. Is it Kummer? Kummer, Jesus. Y'all, yeah. I should have asked that beforehand. Normally I do. Okay, well, that's okay. You all know I screw things up. So that's the fun of the podcast. So Kristen, thank you so much for joining us today on this episode. I'm so excited to have you. So do us all a favor and tell us properly who you are, what it is that you do, and what got you into this.
All right. So I'm Kristen. I'm a health and wellness coach along with a medical intuitive. I just really have a passion for helping people break out of the limitations holding them back from creating that really big, yummy life that they've been craving. And, just all those boxes and limitations put on us by society. So what got me into it? It's a long story. I don't think we have enough time for that, but I've always been really intuitive, and I didn't really know it until I would have prophetic dreams. I'd get woken up to my daughter that had type 1 diabetes, and I'd hear her voice telling me she didn't feel good, and I'd expect her to be standing there, and she wasn't there. So I'd go into her bedroom and check her blood sugar, and it was low. So just things like that have always kind of happened for me. And I always had this feeling we had a lot of health crisis in our family. 2 of my daughters were diagnosed with type 1. My husband had a major brain surgery, and I was hit with a major chronic illness, life-threatening. I almost lost my life about 7 years ago, and bedridden, told I'd never have a quality of life again, so many things. And I was really frustrated and fed up with doctors because I felt like we weren't getting anywhere. And I always just had this I just really wish I could see inside our bodies and know what's going on. And little did I know it's because I could. So one day, I was listening to a podcast, and I heard a lady talking about medical intuition, and it just really grabbed my attention. And so I reached out to her, and I started the training. And as I started doing the training, it just really lit me on fire, and it landed. And it was my soul was coming alive. And I started to realize I had these intuitive gifts, and I could literally see into people's bodies of their energy and see what was going on with them physically, emotionally, kind of where the root of their illness started, because most illnesses have an emotional component, and if not dealt with, it can manifest into physical illness. Yeah. So I get to the root and help them uncover it and find ways to help them heal.
Oh, I love this so much. Okay. Now, and I love this even more for the simple fact that so the intuitive space, right? There's a lot of people that, would be like, oh my God, that's so woo woo. Yeah. And at the same time, right. And I've had doctors say this before, that we know our bodies better than anyone else does, right? So yes, while doctors can understand what's going on, and some of us are very oblivious to the signs that are there, which means we need help with it from a doctor. there are us, right, that like really have tuned into our bodies and like know what's going on. And so it's really hard when you do get a medical doctor that's like, oh, but it's this. And you're like, no, there's something else. Like, and you're telling them that your symptoms aren't lining up. Like you feel that there's something and they're not listening because of their degree. Right. And a lot of people know this as well, because I worked in the medical profession. That was my background. I had a really hard time with doctors because there are so many of them that get stuck in their ego, for lack of better terms, because they think that because they have this degree and went to all this schooling, like they don't have to listen to anyone. Yet there are nurses and all kinds of people around them that hold their business together for them. And that is what allows them to do what it is they want to do. Right. But this intuitive space is super cool to me let me off my soapbox for the medical field. But the intuitive space is super cool because, I recently, and I know I've talked about this a couple of times on the podcast, but with clients, and it's been online as well, I started stepping into this space a little while back, which is super, super cool. But I would love to hear your experience of starting to recognize it, because I know that for me, it was kind of like in certain areas, right? Like, so like showers, funny, I call them shower thoughts. My showers, like if I'm all by myself and I'm like zoned in the water, or if I'm sitting by water, no one's bothering me. Like I have these little, people call them downloads. I have like this little voice that kind of comes out of nowhere. And I just kind of started listening to it. And then once I kind of started leaning into that, it started happening more often. And then what I thought was really cool was, which is why I offer a 90-minute deep dive, is because I channel what someone is focused on. And a lot of people don't understand that. And it's extremely hard to explain. But for me, it's zoning into what someone is saying, and really, it's almost like a shared space of understanding, if that makes sense. That all these things like come out of my head, and there's all these ideas or things I need to work on, or like things that need to be told to them. And I have no clue why, but the more that I just say them instead of holding back, it's like the more that comes through, and you find out that like it resonates with them. It's something they need to do. Like I've had so many people come back afterwards and been like, oh my God, you have no clue, like how much I needed to hear that. Right. Or how much I needed to step in this space. So like, I would love to hear your take on how you kind of started understanding that intuitive piece and how it works for you. Because I know for me, it's more of a little voice, or like a poke that I get now. And so like, I've learned to like tune into that, but I know it's different for other people.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just love that. And yeah, it is. It's so interesting. Like you were saying. So like when I do sessions, it's like, I say things I would never say, words I would never use. Like, you know what I mean? I've had like certain clinics they need to check out for this, and I've never even heard of that clinic before. And it's like, I'm getting off the phone, Googling shit after we're done, going like, wait, what was that? Like, so you know that it's coming for them. But yeah, mine is kind of like I see, but I also know and feel, and I kind of hear too. So it's like,
okay, I can't really put it into words. It is hard to describe what happens, but it's like I can see energy, I can see body parts, I can see connections, but it's like also it's like this hearing and knowing feeling too. So it's really interesting how it comes. But I also do get shower thoughts too. My like water's an energy conductor, so it's like, conducting energy. So yeah, like when I sit down, it just comes from kind of like all areas, and then I have to kind of like put it into context for people. But I just, like you said, the more you say what you feel, what you think, what you see, it just comes out. The stronger it gets, the more clear the messages become. So yeah, that's a lot of my process as well.
Oh, I love that so much. Sorry, guys, let me geek out for just a little bit. Now let me ask you this, because I know that there's a lot of people that, sometimes we get small intuitive nudges. Sometimes it's like a smack over the head, kind of a thing. And for some people, and I know this for me as well, for a while, was like following some of it, but like disagreeing with it as well. And so there's like this really fine line of learning how to wholeheartedly trust yourself versus the logical belief system of that doesn't make any sense, and we try to find the logic understanding or the logical answer for what just popped in our head.
Mm-hmm.
How did you start to teach yourself to trust those nudges so that you could start leaning into it more, so that it becomes more of a habitual understanding?
Mm-hmm. So actually, that was a big part of our training. I went through a 2-year certification process to become a certified medical intuitive.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so we had to do over 60 practice hours, video readings, everything that she had to go back and watch and make sure we were, and most of her training, like, it was helping us deepen our intuition and the visions and all of that kind of stuff. But a big part of what she taught us was neutrality and being able to notice when we were being triggered by something that wasn't, ours, by the logical mind, by all of these kind of things, and being able to keep a level of neutrality to where we weren't bringing our judgments or projections
into the session and projecting our energy, but also not allowing other people's energy to be projected onto us. So it's like a level of neutrality to keep that space really clear and open so that they're getting exactly what they need. And the more you started to do that, like, the more you would feel confident in trusting yourself, because you were releasing your judgments, and you just got to the point where you knew, this isn't meant for me. I don't need to make it make sense. Like, I'm just, and you got to the point where you just started to say what you see, and, all with like ethics and making people safe and all of that kind of stuff. But especially when you're dealing with like medical things and people's health, because to me, that's very personal and sacred, because our health is everything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And just feeling like I was delivering what they needed, but in a place that helped them feel safe and not like, I don't know, not hurting people.
Yeah. Being very aware of that fine line. Yeah. Because I get it, right? Like, there are some times, well, there's a lot of times, right, where like a doctor does have to interject, or, surgery is the only option, or a medication is the option for now, right? Like, there are, depending on where someone's at in their journey. So understanding kind of where you fit in those puzzle pieces. So I get that. I know that for me, because I grew up in a very like logical household and faith-based, like, not that I'm not, faith-based now, but it's more spiritual versus so focused on like God is everything kind of a thing, right? Like there's a difference. It's all in one. It's a different understanding from what the church brings forth and what we start to understand as a natural connection, right? But I know that, like, for me, when I was leaning into like understanding it and kind of trying to figure it all out, what I used to do was I would lean into the thought, and then I would say it, and then I would wait to see like where the proof was, right? So like I would really wait for that person to let me know that it landed with them. I would ask how that felt, right? One of the things that I did a lot was, and my husband was involved in this one. We had a friend that was kind of struggling in their life for a while. And it was kind of right at the time that I really started like saying what was in my thoughts, even if I didn't understand them, just like putting it out. And so I would like write this poor person, I would write like pages, right, of text messages, like it would all just come out just like, and then I would hand it to my husband and I'd be like, this is what I told them, because we were helping a friend together, and he'd be like, where in the hell did that come from? I'm like, I don't know. I have no clue. He was like, well, it's amazing. And I'm like, I know, isn't it?
I love it.
A lot of times I didn't remember what I had said. So I would have to like go back and read it to be like, oh shit, like that is some profound stuff. Like, darn, go me. Right. But it was like, for me, it was, in a logical sense for anyone that's listening that may be fighting this, it's basically taking one belief that you have, right? And taking this new belief that is starting to make sense and like comparing the two, right? And then saying, okay, well, but this is happening and here's the evidence to back it up. Here's what's happening. Here's the evidence to back it up. And it's like, okay, so yes, this was a belief or it was a truth at one point in time, but like it's not anymore. And I think that we forget that we can do that because a lot of times so many things in our mind is programmed from someone else, whether it was how we were raised or people that we were around. I know I had a lot of limiting beliefs and beliefs that were not mine based on my abuse that I went through for 8 years, you know, but we take it wholeheartedly as truth. And it's like, no, like you can actually have a conversation. Yes, people, I talk to myself. You can have a conversation and you can ask yourself and you can say, okay, well, I get that, but this is what's happening now. And like, this is the truth that's attached to it. So, and it's okay for those truths to change. And I think that we forget that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And being like having a history of trauma and abuse myself and having to work through all of that and like and also I was raised in Utah, so a very religious state that had very rigid beliefs. And I had to really work through that as well, just to like even believe that what I was doing was real, like it was happening. But at the same time, it was like, am I just making this up? Is this real? You know what I mean? And it took me a long time to gain that trust within myself. And even when I started doing it and I was seeing it, and then it was like medical things, they would go get test results and come back and the test results would like prove what I said was accurate. You know what I mean? And so it was like, I was seeing the proof, but I was still in this limbo for a while. It took me a while to
really trust myself. And even with all the proof and all of that, just because of my upbringing and my programming and all the beliefs I had that I had to work through and let go of too. So yeah, I completely understand. And then there's that fear too of what like judgment or rejection or what people are going to think when you start telling them I can see inside your body and help you find the root of illness and guide you to which doctor to see or naturopath or what tests to have ran or, you know, all of that kind of stuff. It's like people are like in the beginning, I was like, people are going to think I'm off my rocker. Like I should be in the basement talking about this stuff, you know, but the more I just did, I was like, I started to realize, I remember one day I told my husband, I was like, it felt so real for me and so good that I was doing this. And it was like, I was helping people and I was making a difference in their lives. And I was having, you know, people come to me and be like, I've slept for the first time in like 6 months or 6 years because of like the guidance you gave me and the tests I had done and blah, blah, blah. So I told him, I was like, you know, I finally realized that like my fear of being rejected or people thinking I'm crazy, if I continue to let that like hold me back, I'm doing a disservice because this is my gift. This is what I'm here to do. And I have to let go of the fear of what other people think so that I can go out there and do this.
Yeah, definitely. And that one I think is sometimes some of the hardest, right? Is the shame and the guilt because we all want to be accepted, right? We all want community. As many of us that are like, no, I just want to be by myself. Yeah. But deep down, like you still crave the nurture, the love, the care, the community that so many of us are searching for. And we get so stuck in wanting that instead of realizing that if we become truly who we are, that we will attract those people that are already in that light, right? But instead we try to mold ourselves to fit into what we think people would like and understand so that it's easier when in fact it's 10 times harder on yourself, right? Because then you're just constantly back and forth between the two sides. And then you have to like pretend to show this piece, right? It's exhausting. It's like people that lie. I can't keep my own my true stories straight sometimes because I forget things. I can't imagine if I lied. I wouldn't be able to remember anything. Like
I know. It's so funny. My daughter said that to me the other day. She was like, Mom, you've already told me this. And I was like, well, it's a good thing I'm not a liar, right? Because
I'm just on repeat because I wouldn't be able to keep my story straight because I don't know who I've told.
Yeah. And but it's so freeing, right? At the same time to be able to just like let go of that. And, you know, I know that for a lot of people, that's one of the things that keep us stuck in relationships that don't work for us, jobs that don't work for us, clients that don't work for us, is that fear of losing out, or where is the next thing going to come from, or who is going to comfort me, love me, accept me, kind of a thing. And I love that you brought this up. And I know I've brought this up in my podcast, like way in the beginning, but it still has like stuck out with me. There is a gentleman by the name of Jay Shetty, and I love listening to his stuff. But he was doing a podcast episode, and one of the things that they said, what is something that you used to value, very highly, that you don't anymore? And he said, I don't value being understood. He said, I used to. He said, but I'm okay with it now. Like, I'm okay with not being understood. And that to me was like, every time that I think of it, when it comes back up, like it hits me, right? Because it's like that reminder of, there's a difference between being the true you and being the you that still protects certain pieces for the reasons of rejection, fear, guilt, and not being accepted, right? And that becomes so exhausting versus really leaning into who you are and who you are. And it's amazing the doors that open up and the people that you meet, right? Like me and you. I mean, like,
Right?
I meet some of the most amazing people, because every conversation, I'm just me. And then someone is like, oh my God, then you have to meet this person, right? Like, there's so many more natural connections that happen now versus before, when I felt like I was trying to force it. I was trying to be a certain way, right? And a lot of those connections didn't necessarily align.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it just feels so good to be able to connect with people that are like-minded, and you don't have to uphold anything. You can just be yourself, and it's, it just feels freeing, like you were talking about earlier, to just go be you, share what you have to share, say what's on your heart. And like, I don't know, it's just a whole new level of just like life. Like, you just get to be.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah. And you save a lot of energy that way. I know that, we got to meet with a couple that happened to be coming through Tennessee, that I had an amazing conversation with them on Zoom, and they were like, oh my gosh, we're coming through Tennessee. Like, we'd love to meet with you guys. I was like, of course. Right. And what I thought was going to be like an hour conversation, because they'd kind of gotten in late, it was like 4.5 hours. Like, and we just kept talking, and when my husband and I got in the car, it was like, I told him, I said, these are the kinds of conversations I want to be involved in. The depths of these conversations, the places that you can go with people in these conversations, and the openness to understand someone is there, versus people that are always trying to hide a piece of them, right? We're always trying to judge and not judge at the same time, which then limits the conversation and limits what you bring up. And then if you bring it up, you're like, oh, what are they going to think? Right. And when you have someone that isn't open to understanding your perspective, because they're so closed off in their own, it can flip a conversation, right? Really weird. And I think that's where a lot of us, where our downfall is in the right community, is we're so focused on saying the right thing that we aren't focused on saying the truth. And we don't have the ability to be open and curious about the other person, right? Like, I love asking questions to people. It used to be like, oh, be careful what you ask. No. I'm just like wholeheartedly like, I want to know, right? Yeah. You can always tell me no. It doesn't mean that it has to be a conversation. And at the same time, I would love to understand your perspective, or how you were brought up, or what this means to you. Because even if we went through similar issues, right? You could have taken your trauma one route, and I could have taken my trauma another route, or you could have discovered something that I didn't. And now I want to know, because it could help me, or it could help another person. Right. Like, there's so many puzzle pieces. Sorry.
Oh my gosh.
I'll get off my, okay, moral to the story of today's episode, be open and communicative. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. But it's again, these kinds of conversations, right, it's one of the reasons why I love doing my podcast as well, right, Kristen, is just sharing that with people. And like you said, it's it's this realm of openness that like you don't have to worry. So like you can focus your attention on the things that really matter instead of the superficial issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think also like what you were talking about, realizing that everybody has went through their own set of circumstances, their own traumas. They see life through their own set of lenses, depending on what they've went through, where they've been, how, and everything that is said to you, you don't have to take personal because they're projecting their experiences onto you. And so it's like you can start to be at a point where it's just like, okay, well, that's the way they feel about it because of maybe what they went through or whatever. I don't have to take that as my truth. And I get to, and so
releasing the other people's thoughts and opinions too, because it's like people are always going to have opinions no matter what. And so it's like when you can start to realize that people's opinions are just a part of where they came from, and they can change their mind tomorrow, but right now that's their truth and that's how they view it, and I don't have to take that on as mine. And we can start to just come from a place of neutrality around like the way people view us and the way we view others. And I've also learned so much that like the way we feel internally is projected outwards as well. And so like somebody could say something and we might take it personally because of a wound inside of us that we never, you know what I mean? And so it's like, also just realizing that like maybe that's, and that communication, like you're talking about, the open communication of just like being open and understanding and like try to see things from a open perspective instead of like taking everything so personally, I think has helped me a lot.
Yeah, I agree with you on that 100%. When I really started learning how to let go of other people's thoughts because they're not mine, right? And you're not going to change them, right? Especially if they're really stuck in who they are or what it is that they're doing. You're not going to change it. So you're arguing for the sake of just arguing, and then that's where you have to understand like where does your truth really lie? Like, is it really that important to be right and to get it across? Or is it more important to just say your truth and accept that, they're at a different level than you are, and that's fine. And they can choose to be like that. And you just move on to the next one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So now when you're chatting with people, about their own healing, especially on the medical side of that, do you find that some of the wounds and the things that they are dealing with is because of something that has been harbored for so long?
Yeah, most physical illnesses that I've worked with have an emotional thing and an emotional attachment and some sort of something that happened in childhood. And that's usually the root that we find, some kind of incidents or something that happened in childhood that they've kind of created a cell memory in their body that manifested into physical illness. I also do past life readings. I don't know how people feel about that, but that's another part. And sometimes we can carry stuff forward. Our soul has a progression that we kind of carry things forward that sometimes might, like, it's a part of our soul. Akashic records, all of that kind of stuff is also things I do. So
we just hit the jackpot right there. Okay. Hold on, y'all. We're going to have to extend this episode. Like, because for so long, right? Like, especially in your religious upbringing, right? Past lives for most religions, especially like what is it? Western culture, if I'm getting that right, if I said that right. Like that's not a thing, right? Especially like, so my family's Catholic. That is not a thing, like, because that's considered reincarnation and like, oh, hell no. Right. But it is interesting when you look at some of the things, and I've talked with people that have done past life regression, and the connections are crazy, like crazy. So it's like, you can always be open to it. Because
can I just say I was so against past lives and my upbringing and everything I thought, and now to be doing past life readings, like what? Just saying, like, I became open, and when I do like soul, so I call them soul path readings, and it's like past, present, and then like ideas to shift it, to release the karma, to be able to move forward so that you're not carrying that karmic connection. But the connections that were made and the things that happened, they're like, that's exactly exactly what's happening in my life right now and blah, blah, blah. Like, and I would never know that. And so, you know what I mean? It's just like, I mean, I had to become open to it as well. So that's all I'm
Yeah.
going to say.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely. I get that. But it's interesting that like the more that you grow and the more that you level up and the more open you become, the more that the possibilities start to show themselves and it starts to make sense, right? Versus when you're like so closed-minded, you're like, nope, like this is logic, this is this. And there's actually a lot of science behind a lot of the things that people do. It's just, it's not talked about because it's been shoved off as woo-woo because in my personal opinion, the government can't make money off of it.
Yeah.
Your medical facilities can't make money off of it. Your pharmaceutical companies can't make money off of it, that it's been shoved down as like this crazy, doesn't make sense crap. But when you look into, like, I talked with a gentleman that was an engineer, but like he studied quantum physics and things like that. Like there are things that like open your mind up to understanding the possibilities that are there. It's just that the media can't make tons of money off of it. So therefore it's not going to be promoted. That's how I feel. Right.
No, I completely agree. There's a big moneymaker in there that they're trying to keep us all, you know, and like, even with my health coaching and like detoxing the body and, you know, getting back to a state of health, like, yeah, that's frowned upon because they can't keep us on a cocktail of stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna leave it at that. But yeah,
if you want a more in-depth conversation where we can really complain
give
about,
me a
no,
call.
I'm just kidding. So now for the listeners that have never heard of or don't understand what Akashic records are, can you give us a brief, like, explaining definition? Because I know I screw it up every time because I'm still learning about it. But to me, the Akashic records is something that is super fascinating.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So the Akashic records is like the book of our soul. It's like the record keeper. It kind of, it's like a library where it holds all of the information from like everything your soul's ever experienced. And so it's just a wealth of knowledge and information when you can go into them, because you can see things that happen in past lives
with your soul, you know, and where this like karma and stuff like that could have been created, and just kind of those connections that your soul's carrying, and it can give you information to be able to like shift that on a karmic level so that you don't continue carrying that onto the progression of your soul, I guess. So it's just it's like your soul's book. That's my best way to describe it.
Yeah, right. I love that. And I had another lady that described that one time. I think I was listening to a podcast and she was kind of talking about it a couple years ago. And that's what kind of got me interested in it. I was like, ooh, this is fascinating. But she said that she kind of sees it like a file cabinet, right, of each individual. And then there's different pieces that you can pull from it. And for a lot of us that have blocks that we're not sure what the block is, but we know it's there, but we're not sure what it came from. And we've done like all these pieces. A lot of the times, like you said, it's a karmic pull from it. There's something that you aren't even aware of that needs to be dealt with, but at least you're noticing the block right now. It's like, now where do you go? Who do you talk to go deeper into that, to figure out what that could possibly be. And I feel like that is what a lot of people talk about when they say breaking the karmic chain, right? So that the next generations can get over things. And to bring it to a scientific point for anyone that's like, what in the hell are you two talking about? Okay, so there is such a thing as generational trauma. It has been scientifically proven. It has been found in the DNA. For those, especially, they did a lot for the Holocaust, right? A lot of people in the Holocaust, there are generational traumas that are connected with things that they experience, certain fears that have been passed down for generations. And they are just now starting to discover, they've noticed it in rats and all kinds of stuff, but they're noticing it, that it literally is stuck in the DNA, right? Yeah. So if you want to look at it from that standpoint, and you don't want to get into the whole, there's no way we have past lives. Okay, well, think about generations and generations before you, right? Go back 400 or 500 freaking years. There could be something that your ancestors lived, felt, feared, didn't get a chance to deal with, that just kept getting passed down. And it literally has been proven to be embedded in the DNA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true. And also, like, I do human design as well. I'm certified in human design, and human design is a lot of that, the DNA and the genetic makeup. And it's also, if you look into like epigenetics and all of that kind of stuff, it's all recorded in our DNA, like things that happen to our ancestors is passed down. So we might have these fears or these angers that we're carrying around that don't make any sense to us because they're actually not ours, but it is in our DNA and it is embedded into our body. And so it's like these things that we're carrying around on an energetic level, like, but you can also like rewire your DNA. Like, I know it sounds crazy, but like you can really release and transform these things. And so it's like when you're healing yourself, you're like healing your generations, past and present. And so then it's not going to be passed on to future generations. Like, I don't know. It's all so interesting, but also, so like your mother is created in your grandma's womb, and her ovaries and all of that kind of stuff are created when she's inside your grandmother. So it's like you got to also realize that pieces of our grandma are being carried in our bodies. Like our ovaries are being created when we're inside the womb of our mother, right? But then it all came from our grandma. I know it's but I mean, it's like it really is passed down.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. And it goes back to, it's literally inside the DNA, just like, if you've got grandparents from one country and grandparents from another country and all, right. All of that is somewhere in your DNA. It may be very small pieces, but it's still in your DNA. And those traumas and things like that can be passed through that as well. But that's where I think that a lot of people get confused, is because they don't put the science and the openness together to understand that there's a lot more science that proves the things that we don't deal with and why we aren't healing from it. It's just not, again, right. It's not talked about on a big level across society, because you wouldn't need pharmaceuticals as much. You wouldn't need your doctors as much. Right. So there's not a mass way for people to make money off of it. So therefore you can look it up, right? Like there is the research behind a lot of it. It's just not something that's talked about on a huge open platform, because it's not a money generating thing.
Yeah,
right.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And human design, I think is extremely fascinating.
Yeah.
I learned about my human design and it was amazing. Actually I did an episode with a lady that specifically deals with human design in business. So prior episode, you guys. But it was so much fun. And it is so crazy to see the connections as they're reading through this. And it makes a lot of sense. Like, even if you don't understand it, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that's another thing that we have to be very aware of, is we get so caught up in like this logical thinking that we have to know, we have to understand, that we forget that there's realms of possibility. And here's the thing, right? If it wasn't for those that stepped outside into that realm of possibility, we wouldn't have electricity, right? We wouldn't have, plumbing. We wouldn't have airplanes. Like there are things that we all say is freaking nuts and that's batshit and there's no way that could happen. However, they said that before as well. So being open to it, you can puzzle piece things together, but you have to be able to be curious and you have to ask questions, right? And then you can make a judgment. You can't make a judgment from, oh, well, I don't see this. This has never happened. There's nothing that proves it. Well, not everything has always been proved. It takes science to prove things, right? It takes years of going through things. It just means we don't have the proof yet, but it doesn't mean, right, that it's not a possibility. All right, off my soapbox again. Sorry, you got it.
Well, I just have to say, so like one of my main sessions I like to talk about. I mean, I have had a lot, but so a lady came to me and she had been struggling with what they thought was GERD. They put her on antacids and she's like, I can't sleep at night. I'm having so much pain. It's keeping me up. The antacids aren't helping. And I was like, well, I don't see GERD. Like what I'm seeing is a sac of fluid around your heart. It looks like some sort of an infection, and it needs to be treated with antibiotics. And she's just like, oh my gosh, you're never going to believe this. But like 2 years ago, I had this condition, and she told me the name. I can't remember, but, and she's like, and they treated me with antibiotics and like it got better. So I never followed back up. And then I started having problems again. So I went to the doctor, and anyways, so she's like, I was like, I recommend you see like a cardiologist, you know? So like, I do still work with Western medicine and all of that kind of stuff. Like what comes through is what they need. It's not just like, you know, it's exactly what they need. Anyway, so she went and she had an ultrasound of her heart done, and needless to say, she had that sac of fluid around her. They treated her with antibiotics and cleared it up. So I've had a lot of things like that happen that do have proof, you know, that like my accuracy is there. Like another lady came to me and she had spine problems. She had been like chiropractors, and for like 6 years she had been going back and forth, and they told her it was her hip as you get older, having kids, all this kind of stuff. And they were just trying to do all these things, and she wasn't getting relief. And I said, what I see is degeneration of your tailbone. And it looks like it happened when you were in childhood. I see you like crashing on your bike and you broke your tailbone and it never healed correctly. And she's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I did. And that's true. And so it was like degenerating and calcifying and sending pain over into her nerves, and it recommended she see an osteopath and that they could do stem cell treatments and stuff like this. And so she went and saw an osteopath, and he told her, oh, I think it's just your hip. And she's like, well, she recommends I have an x-ray because this and this. And she's like, I was so nervous to say I saw a medical intuitive, but I just said it, and he ordered an x-ray. And she's like, and needless to say, it was exactly what you said. And they started doing stem cell treatments and like injecting it into her spine area.
Yeah.
And it started to like regenerate it. And so that's the lady I was talking about earlier, that like, she's like, I finally slept for the first time in 6 years, like, because my pain is relieved. So yeah.
That's so cool. Like that's, and that's where I think a lot of people don't realize that they want to write it off really quick, but it's like, you have to understand that both sides can work together. But we have put so much faith and trust into doctors because they have a degree and they've read a book. Nothing against doctors out there that are amazing. I've met some amazing doctors, but those doctors do their research. Those doctors go beyond what those books tell them, and they pay attention to the signs that people give them. Right. And that's what you're looking for. You know, when I worked in the medical field, I worked in chiropractic. And so I dealt with a lot of people that had neuropathy and back pains and all kinds of different stuff. Right. When you really listen to what people are telling you, you can find ways to help them. And the thing is trying out different things to see what works for them. We forget that. And I think a lot of doctors forget that as well. They're just like, let me just slap a Band-Aid on it, or this is what solves this problem every single time. And it's like, no, because there could be so many underlying issues that you're not aware of. So I feel like they're just not asking the right questions. They could have the answers, just not asking the right questions. So I think merging the two is amazing, and it can provide so much relief to so many people, especially those that have been to all the doctors, all the people, tried all the drugs, and nothing is helping. There has to be alternative ways to that. And sometimes it takes a different method to get people to listen. Because again, we know our body better than anyone else. And if we start tuning into it and start listening, then we can articulate to our medical doctors and to those around us better of what is going on, which may help them understand. Right. But you also need to be aware that you can't just blindly trust a doctor because they're a doctor.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And that's why I take a holistic approach to everything I do, because we're a whole being. Like, we're emotional, spiritual, physical, and every single part of us is intertwined and connected. And so that's like, you know, you can't just focus on the physical and ignore the emotional. You can't just focus on the emotional and ignore the physical. Like, it all has to be brought together. And so I think where I go in and I can find the emotional root and the physical root, then you can heal it on a deep level, because you're dealing with the emotion, but you're also dealing with it on a physical level. So, and then the spiritual piece,
Yeah. And that's what it means to heal the body. And we forget that there are so many pieces and parts of us. And you're right, mentally, emotionally, like physically, you have to heal all of those pieces. Otherwise, you're just masking the symptoms. You're just using something to numb it or to cover up until that drug doesn't work anymore. Right. Which they eventually end up wearing off, and you've got to change. But you're right. You need to be able to heal all parts of you. Just like a vehicle, right? If it's having issues in the motor and you fix, the radiator, but it was essentially something else, like you have to fix all the pieces. You can't just fix one and be like, oh, we should be good, right? It'll drive. No, it doesn't work like that, right? Like it's the same thing with us and our bodies. We have different components, and we have to fix all of those components if we want to heal everything to the 100th degree, right?
Because we can run and eat and do all the things, but if we're not dealing with that emotion, it's not, or we can be constantly focused on the emotion, but forget our physical body. So yeah, like you said, it all matters.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much. So before we end, even though I feel like we could talk forever on this. Kristen, one thing that I always ask from everybody is, do you happen to have a quote or a piece of advice you would like to leave the audience with today?
I think my biggest thing is it's never too late to chase your dreams, just go after whatever it is. There was a reason that vision and that thing was placed on your heart. So.
I love that. I love that so much. Yeah. And I think we forget that it's easier to take the easy route, right? And be miserable, than take the harder route. So I love that so much. So Kristen, tell us then, where can everybody find you? How can they connect with you? How can they be in your world?
Okay. So I have it's called Soul Shine Holistic Healing. And I offer intuitive sessions, one-to-one coaching, different group programs. So yeah, I'm on Instagram. I have a website, Facebook.
Awesome. And what is the website? Everybody.
SSHH, like with Kristen at Gmail or at. I don't even know. No, it's just kidding. So it's like SSHH with Kristen. So .com. So yeah.
Awesome. And we'll have all that information, of course, in the show notes as well for anybody to be able to find and check out.
Type it.
Girl, I'll do the same thing. So we'll have all that information in the show notes for you guys, so you guys can click on it and connect with Kristen, and reach out to her, ask questions, right? The more that you can be curious, the more that you can learn, and you may be surprised. It may be something that's profound for you that you needed to figure out. So Kristen, I cannot thank you enough for being a part of the podcast and sharing all of these pieces, like on so many levels. I know that there are so many people out there going to be Googling a lot of things.
Right?
Oh, but I love it so much. So thank you so much for being a part of the podcast, Kristen.
I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, of course, you are so welcome. And to everybody else out there, I hope you got some amazing takeaways. And again, if you don't understand it, go Google.
Right.
And take a look, right? But go with an open mind, just to see what might be out there. You might be intrigued more than you think you would be. So until next time, don't forget, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. So until next time, have a fantastic day. Hello again, and thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. If you enjoyed this episode and it brought tons of value, we ask that you please share, like, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us and helps us to reach even more inspiring entrepreneurs who can benefit from these powerful conversations. If you haven't already, be sure to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, as this feedback is an amazing gift that fuels our growth and helps us to continually improve this podcast. Looking for an extra dose of inspiration and empowerment? Then be sure to connect with me on social media. You can find me at The Lotus Effect, where I share valuable resources and tips while sharing my own journey of being an entrepreneur. And if you're interested in learning more about my coaching programs and services, be sure to check out my website at the-lotus-effect.com. Once again, thank you so much for being a part of Real Chat with Kat. Your presence and support makes all the difference. Remember, whether you find yourself in the depths of the mud or on the path of growth, we all have a unique journey. And just like the lotus, some of us start in the dirtiest of mud, yet as we rise and grow, we blossom into something beautiful, unique, and truly one of a kind. To all of my visionaries out there, keep rising and growing as you create your own Lotus Effect.